Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I'm here with 12 rare works that I actually played in concert. This is really a fun list because, we talk about all the time, all the unusual repertoire that we enjoy in recordings that we're never actually going to hear. But this is stuff that I actually had the opportunity to play, largely because I was in charge of repertoire for a community orchestra for quite some time. The successor to the Doctors Orchestra in New York, it was called New York Symphonic Arts Society or something like that. I wish I even remembered. It was a while ago. But yeah, we did some wonderful stuff. It was a wonderful, wonderful group full of lovely people who were foolish enough to entrust their repertoire selections to me. Yes, to me. But we actually had a committee. And we would all scrunch into my little studio apartment, all, 7 or 8 of us on the committee. And I would start pulling down CDs and playing things and saying, hey, let's do this or let's do that. And, it was always possible because we had access to the Fleischer collection at the Free Library of Philadelphia, which is the world's largest collection of ready-to-use scores and orchestral parts. Basically, we could do anything we wanted. You just call them up and tell them what you want. They send you the music, and then you send it back to them. Really, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary resource. I visited them a couple times, too. What an amazing place. I mean, it's just incredible what the resources are for performing arts organizations. And so, to a large extent, the excuse of not having access to this material is just bullshit because, you can get it. And to a large extent, a lot of the most interesting programming, and I've gotten this from the comments from some of you too, is happening not at the exalted professional orchestra level where they're either doing the same old, or they're doing, the flavor of the month composer or whatever the heck, they're doing there for political reasons, but rather it's happening at the community orchestra level where music lovers and enthusiasts get together and have a tremendous fund of knowledge of, what hasn't been heard and what they'd like to hear. And the audiences are wonderful because they usually consist of senior citizens and, wonderful little old ladies who show up on Sunday afternoons, and it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to enjoy it because they just want to get out of the house. And the concerts are free. You ask for a donation to sort of cover your basic, Kool-Aid expenses, and you're in business. So we did a lot of stuff, lots and lots of interesting repertoire. And here are 12, I think, of the more interesting, unusual works that I actually had the opportunity to play under various circumstances. Not all with my community orchestra, but mostly. First, Martinu. Yeah, Martinu. We did the first symphony. We also did the fourth, but I'm only doing one work per composer. Martinu's Symphony No. 1. I think everybody was astonished at how beautiful it was, and everybody was annoyed at how syncopated it was because it's really hard to count. Martinu is one of those composers, if you look at his tempo indications, it's always poco allegro, poco andante, or moderato, and it all looks like it's sort of going at the same moderate pace. But then you look at the way he actually writes, because he uses small note values. He often is writing in eighth notes, and it's all totally syncopated, like the opening tune, da 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 dum ba da 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 da. It's really, 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 it's a style. You have to get used to it, and you have to be really good at counting eighth notes. And if you do that and you relax and let it flow, then it all happens quite nicely. And what a beautiful piece that was. I mean, great time doing it. I mean, I played percussion, of course, in all of these things, which meant not only did I get to inflict all the difficulty on just about everybody else in the orchestra, but then I got to sit in the back and relax and enjoy it and watch what they were all doing. And that was so much fun. It really was. Then we did, Frank Bridge, The Sea. Nobody does Frank Bridge's The Sea. It's a lovely seascape. I mean, it's such a wonderful change from Debussy's La Mer. It's really a 4-movement symphony. It's an opening movement, a scherzo, a slow movement, and then a storm, of course, finale. And it's in cyclical form, and the big tune, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, comes back at the end. gosh, it's lovely. It's really lovely. People should do it once in a while. I mean, that's how we felt about most of this stuff. We really did. We were just looking to have a good time and do something a little bit different once in a while. And boy, everybody in the orchestra, of course, was represented on the committee. And, the string players wanted good string parts. And the woodwind players wanted good woodwind parts. And I mean, the clarinetists hated the Haydn London symphonies because the clarinet parts are very primitive. In the last 6 of them, and they are. He's very cautious in using clarinets because it was only in Vienna where you had Mozart, where you could really write nifty clarinet parts in those days. And, things like that. And you learn so much. You learn so much about the individual capabilities of the various instruments and what their tastes are and what they like to do. It was just wonderful. It was the best musical education in the universe, I got to tell you. So after that, we brought in Alfred Heller. Alfred Heller was a pupil of, I believe, Aldo Parasot, who was at Yale, the great cellist, and the Brazilian people, and they were all Villa-Lobosians. And Alfred Heller was a major disciple of Villa-Lobos. And we did with him the Bachianas Brasileiras number 4, which is gorgeous. Everybody knows number 2 because it has the little choo-choo train at the end, or number 5, because it's for, an orchestra of 8 cellos and cello solo and a humming soprano, soprano vocalese with a poem in the middle and whatnot. It's in 2 movements. Usually you only hear the first. Oh, never mind. But yeah, so we did the 4th Bachianas Brasileiras, which is just gorgeous, fabulous. Again, it's like a 4-movement symphony. No one ever touches it. We also did his 2nd suite for orchestra, I believe. We did a couple of Villa-Lobos pieces. It was really fun. All these pieces were really fun. I mean, we had such a good time. Then we did the premiere, the U.S. premiere, which was almost the world premiere, live concert performance of George Lloyd's Symphony No. 5. There we got the music from George Lloyd himself. I've told this story before. It almost got lost in the mail because George was a little bit absent-minded, and instead of sending it airmail, he sent it by slow boat, which meant it was like never going to get here. And I had to go and get the music from the U.S. Postal Service sorting facility in Weehawken, New Jersey, which was this enormous building. It's an unbelievable story. But we did it, and it was gorgeous and great fun, and nobody was playing George Lloyd then, and we had to wait, actually, because he was conducting the world premiere performance. This was after the recording, that famous recording with Edward Downes on Lyrita had been made. But he was doing the world premiere live performance in Bournemouth, I believe it was. And so we had to wait until he'd done that before we could do our version. And again, it was a lovely guy. He was happy to have his music played. He just sent us the music, and woof, off we went. It's so easy. And now, everybody can get his music. It's in the Fleischer collection. They've donated, scores and parts to the Fleischer collection so that other people can play it. Are they doing it? Probably not. But damn it, they should. I remember how exciting it was after we did the 5th. Nimi Yarvi did the 7th in Chicago. And it was like, wow, yeah, we started something. Of course, it had nothing to do with us, but, we like to tell ourselves that in the old orchestra there, in the New York Symphonic Arts Ensemble. And let's see, we also did Hamilton Harty's Irish Symphony. I don't know why people don't play that either. That was a symphony that was written, in the wake of Dvořák's New World Symphony, where there's a bunch of New World copycat pieces. And it was supposed to use, because the New World was thought to use like American folk music or something. It doesn't do anything like that. It's entirely original. But the Irish Symphony does use actual Irish folk songs. There are a couple of recordings of it. There's one on Chandos, which is really kind of mediocre. And then there's a wonderful one on Naxos, which is kind of mediocre. And the one on Chandos is the one to get. It's with the complete Hamilton Harty orchestral music, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. The scherzo has some very famous tunes. Da da dum bum 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 da dum bum ba da 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 da. The Girl I Left Behind Me, or whatever that thing is called, and a whole bunch of other ones. And it has a great tam-tam crash at the end, and beautiful writing for harp. And it's a little romantic minor masterpiece. And why it doesn't get played? Well, at least I had the opportunity to play it. And that was just, a big deal. Rimsky-Korsakov. There's a guy who wrote tons of orchestral music that doesn't get played, including all these wonderful opera suites. And I thought to myself back in the day, why aren't we doing some of those? And of course, it all depended on the conductor, because we would audition conductors at the beginning of each season. And sometimes, they would cooperate, and sometimes they didn't want to cooperate. We tried to get the ones who wanted to cooperate. We asked them to propose repertoire. And you would be amazed at just how uninteresting their choices were. I'll never forget the conductor whose idea of excitement was a concert version of Mozart's complete Idomeneo. Talk about a wrist-slashing Sunday evening. Oh, my God. And I love Idomeneo. Don't get me wrong. But you do not want to hear a community orchestra under a cranky Austrian conductor doing a complete 3-hour... Yeah. Especially since a lot of the orchestra wouldn't have even been able to participate. The whole idea with these concerts was to do things that everybody could do, that gave everyone something to do. So one of those things that we did was Rimsky-Korsakov's suite from the opera Christmas Eve, which has this wonderful, starry, beautiful prelude. Da 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 da. With glockenspiels and twinkly and starry night music, and then it has the wild ride with the devil part. That was a lot of fun for me because it has this wonderful rhythm, da 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 da, and the conductor wanted a really nasty cymbal sound because you're supposed to use a suspended cymbal and go cha 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 cha. So I had a Chinese cymbal, and anyone who knows Chinese cymbals, they look like little hats, and they have a very trashy sound, as they say in the percussion world. It's a wonderful, like a small gong kind of sound. And I hit it with a hard mallet and went rack, 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 rack. It just sounded great. And then there's this big polonaise and a beautiful quiet ending. Like everything by Rimsky-Korsakov, it has no sense of timing whatsoever. The slow parts go on for way too long. They're too repetitious. Who cares? The music's beautiful. And that was just a lovely concert. We also did at the same concert, I think, Roussel's Third Symphony. Those were the days. We could put programs together that consisted of anything we felt like doing. After Rimsky-Korsakov, Walter Piston, Symphony No. 2. I remember our principal cellist, he detested Piston. He was so against doing Piston because he'd been forced to play Piston when he was a wee lad in conservatoire. Piston was a big deal because he wrote, he taught at Harvard, where he wrote the books on instrumentation and counterpoint and things like that. And so he was like a standard, academic bugbear for American music students in the 1950s and 60s. And so everyone hated him. But he was a wonderful composer. And the Second Symphony is a beautiful symphony in 3 movements. And I don't understand why, again, we never hear it. Actually, that's not true. I did hear the Second Symphony once. There was an all-piston concert that they gave at Carnegie Hall that had the first violin concerto, which is a masterpiece, and the sixth, and this thing, and something else. And it was a whole bunch of piston things. And it was absolutely wonderful to actually hear it from the side of the audience for a change. The piece went over very well. I think the problem with piston symphonies is that most of them are just too short to program regularly. They're really first half pieces. You do it before the intermission where the concerto would normally go, and then you could find some big slam bang concerto for the second half of the program to conclude the concert or something like that, because they're only like 25 minutes long. And it's just, and they're hard. They're difficult. They're tricky. Rhythmically, they're quite tricky as often as not. And, the wonderful thing about community orchestras is that we don't know how tricky things are, and we don't care, because if we don't get it right, we approximate. That's what we do. It reminds me of, Isaac Bashevis Singer talking about the Yiddish language newspaper that he wrote for, that a lot of his stories were published in. And he said, actually, we're bankrupt, but we have very, very old accountants, and they haven't figured that out yet. Well, that's the way we were with some of these pieces. It's like, they were way beyond our ability, but what the hell? We were going to give it a good shake anyway. You should have heard what we did to Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances. Oh my. We had a conductor who just decided that we were never going to get it quite right in the finale, so he should just play it as fast as humanly possible and see if we managed to finish together. We did. Barely. After Piston, Malcolm Arnold. Oh, I wanted to do so much Malcolm Arnold, but that was a little tough, getting the music and getting everything together at the time. We did the English dances. I actually played the Scottish dances in band, but the English dances, oh gosh, they're so beautiful, and it's so much fun to play. They're written, believe it or not, one of the things about Malcolm Arnold is that he was an unbelievably good orchestrator. He did all that film music and whatnot. But the English dances are written for a perfectly normal, standard orchestra with like no extras. It's just like, maybe there's a piccolo. I don't know, but it's like two double winds and 4 horns and 2 trumpets and 3 trombones and tuba and a couple of percussionists and timpani. But, there's a harp. But you get the most amazing colors out of the orchestra, largely because of his handling of the wind section, because he understood right away that great orchestration begins with your woodwind section. These are things that I learned, too, sitting in the orchestra and just watching and listening. The pieces that have, the most color, the most fun to play, or sonically, that had, the most glittering timbres were all the pieces where the composers really knew what to do with the woodwind section. It's not that string orchestras aren't beautiful, and of course in community orchestra the string section kind of rules, and they always wanted better things for the strings. I mean, I'll never forget during the Christmas Eve suite, there's some string rhythmic stuff, galloping stuff for the ride with the devil and all that part of it. And, one of the violinists said to me, Rimsky Korsakov didn't understand anything about the violin. And I just looked at her and just went, yeah, you do, honey? Yeah, really? I mean, really? But he knew his woodwinds, and so did Malcolm Arnold. Then, in the concerto world, well, we did a bunch of interesting concertos. The problem with concertos is that you need to find soloists. I mean, I've talked to you about doing the Dandy Symphony on a French Mountain Air, where we had this hotshot soloist, Russian soloist at the Manhattan School of Music. He was like a visiting professor type, and he was going to do it. Then he looked at the part. It was too hard. He realized he couldn't learn it. He dropped out at the last minute, which was absolutely terrible. But it worked out wonderfully because we got Sylvia Kahan, who was a brilliant pianist and French music scholar who runs the graduate center at the City University of New York at CUNY on Staten Island, I believe. And she played it. Oh, I was so excited. She only made one mistake at the very end. And I met her like 8 years later. I didn't really meet her. I was playing percussion at the Dandy, and I didn't meet her again until like 8 years later at a symposium in Edinburgh, of all places. And we were talking about things we'd done, and she mentioned that. I went, oh, that's right. You did that, didn't you? You made a mistake at the very end. And she laughed. She said, oh, yeah. But we were really we were so lucky to have her. She did such a good job. Anyway, we did the Ireland Piano Concerto. That's what I'm talking about. I played woodblock. I can play you my part. I went chuck, 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 chuck. Da 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 da. Oh, another lovely piece. There's not a lot for the orchestra to do in that one. It's all piano, especially in the first movement. Lots and lots of piano. Every so often the orchestra comes in with ya da 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 ba da 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 or something like that. But wow, another piece that could be enormously popular. It's sort of in the style of Prokofiev's Third Symphony. It's like Prokofiev goes to England, if you can imagine such a thing. It's Ireland's only real large-scale orchestral work, and it's been recorded a few times. You can get very fine recordings of it, and we wanted to hear it. We wanted to hear it live, and we had a pianist who would do it. That's always the thing. There are quite a few young pianists out there. And nowadays, they're all so talented. I mean, they're just amazingly gifted, who will actually learn unusual repertoire if you ask them to do it, if you give them a few bucks. I mean, you got to feed them. Usually, if they're like starving, you want to find the ones who are hungry, first of all. Find a really gifted pianist who is starving. And you give them a few donuts and some, take them out to dinner, and they'll play anything. Absolutely anything. So we got somebody, and we corralled them to do the Ireland Piano Concerto, and they did a wonderful job. And that was one of our better concerto discoveries, because it's not hard. Like I said, the orchestra doesn't have all that much to do. And what the orchestra does do isn't terribly complicated, but it just works fabulously well. The piano and the orchestra have a great time. And if you have a good pianist, it's going to be a knockout. And it was. It was really fantastic. Hovhaness. Yeah, remember him? Who wrote 475,000 symphonies? Well, I did Symphony number 127,306, which was the Symphony for Metal Orchestra. This was not in my community orchestra. This was a recording project with the Manhattan Chamber Orchestra, and I actually am on the recording, which was on the Koch label. Koch. It's still out there around somewhere. I mean, sometimes you can find it. No one quite knows what this piece was called. On the front of the album, it was the Symphony for Metal Orchestra, which I thought it was called. Then on the back, it's the Symphony of Metal Instruments, which it is, I haven't a clue. I don't know which number it is. I don't remember. I have to go dig out the record if I'm that curious, and I'm not. But I got to play the tam-tam. It's a wonderful work scored for 6 flutes and 6 trombones and a pile of percussion. It's it doesn't sound like your usual Hovhaness. It's based on his research and study of Korean folk music. And so it's Asian sounding, because everything he writes is kind of Asian sounding, but it's definitely in a different harmonic palette and a very different timbral palette. I mean, it's a fascinating, assortment of instruments, a very limited assortment, but they make some quite alarming and splendid sounds. And I had a very, very good time tam-tamming. Michael Fine, by the way, was the producer of that recording. He went on to become temporarily the head of Deutsche Grammophon for a few minutes, and he did a lot of wonderful record production stuff. He set up his own production company after that. It was based out of Philadelphia, I think, or somewhere in Pennsylvania, with his wife Tammy, and he was a very talented producer. Although he did say to me that the tam-tam it said large tam-tam, and so I brought the big Kahuna there, and he always told me it was too loud, even when it was marked fortissimo. He's like, no, the microphones are going to blow up. You got to take it easy. And he was right, because we got a good balance and a good sound after the whole thing. It was really fun. And last but not least, I keep saying it's all really fun. Well, it was. It was all really fun. And last but not least, Dvořák. Well, we did a lot of unusual Dvořák because there's tons of it. Tons of it that doesn't get played. There's the Slavonic Rhapsodies. There's the Czech Suite. There's just the American Suite, scads of it. But what I wanted to do was some of the tone poems, because nobody plays the tone poems. They only seem to show up on recordings. We did the Noonday Witch, and we did, first and foremost, the Water Goblin, which was so much fun to my way of thinking, because you really need to do interesting things with the cymbal parts, whether it's a suspended or crash cymbal. It's not really indicated. And Kubelik gets it right, by the way, if you want to hear a recording where the cymbal part is done the way it's supposed to be done. But most conductors just let it go, and it doesn't sound right to me. When it gets loud, it just goes yum, jump, jump, you're supposed to switch from suspended cymbal to crash cymbals, but it's not indicated in the score. And the parts generally in the Dvořák tone poems were kind of a mess. I mean, in the Noonday Witch, there was a percussion part for like a bell thing at the beginning. I mean, there were parts for instruments that weren't in the full score, and it took some cleaning up. They obviously had not been printed with great care and were not performed all that often. I mean, the Water Goblin has some really cool, ad-lib parts. I mean, 2 tubas, 8 horns. If you want to do the whole thing, it's a good thing to piece to program if you're doing like Till Eulenspiegel or something, which also has extra trumpets and extra horns if you want to, for just like 2 bars. What a great tone poem that is, and fun to play, and beautiful fun. There's the word again. A joy, a thrill, ecstatic, extase. No, it has to be French if you get extase. But it was delightful to play, and the music is so tuneful and melodious and beautifully written and gorgeously scored. The woodwinds again. And so there you have it. 12 not all that common pieces that I had the great honor and pleasure and privilege of actually performing and learning from the inside. Gosh, it was a great experience. Those couple of decades I had playing all that stuff. This was, before I moved, first of all, and then got multiple sclerosis and, started to get even less coordinated than I am now. It's really something when you're a percussionist, because, I had all of my own instruments, stuck in my apartment. And so I needed transportation to get to and from concerts. When we got a regular venue, which we eventually did at Julia Richmond High School, the then Julia Richmond High School, which was on, I think, 67th Street in Manhattan. After that, they closed it. I think they turned it into condominiums or something now. It's such a shame. But it was a performing arts high school then. And so there was a basement where we could keep a tam-tam, and I had a bass drum, and I had a xylophone and glockenspiel. I had a whole, kit and section that was in the basement. And that's where we kept it. But before that, it was all my apartment. And unless they rented a van or hired somebody, or one of the nicer people who drove to rehearsals would pick me up, I had a very hard time getting to concerts, because New York taxis were not really happy to stop for people carrying a cymbal bag and a tam-tam and all this other paraphernalia, which may or may not fit into the back of the car or the trunk or whatever. But we managed. I managed for about 20 years. 25 years, something like that. And oh, what a joy it was. So there you go. Keep on listening, friends. I know a lot of you play community orchestras too, and I'm sure you have similar experiences. Tell me about some of the more interesting repertoire that you had the opportunity to do. I'm sure that there are some really fascinating pieces out there that we are all dying to hear live and likely never will. Anyway, thank you for joining me.